This meeting is now being recorded.
All right, here we go. Jennifer, take it away.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, Hoki. Thank you everyone for listening in today. So I'm Jennifer Russell, and I have the honor of leading our illustrious INCOSE group towards our Smart Cities initiative. And I'm really excited to share with you a bit today about this new initiative, kind of how it got going and where we are right now. So I will just introduce briefly, I'm the chair of this initiative, and my co-chair is Marcel van de Ven. He works for the construction firm Heijmans in the Netherlands. He's been involved with the infrastructure working group at INCOSE for many years, and many of us know Marcel pretty well. So since we don't have webcast, and now in this new post-COVID or mid-COVID age of video chats all the time, here's Marcel and me. Of course, I need my hair cut, so it's not quite that short anymore. I would also like to offer that you are welcome to interrupt me as I'm going along. I will keep talking. Hoki, if you want to practice chat, and if you have questions while we're going, it's no problem to interrupt or ask a question midstream. I have a lot that I'm excited to share with everyone. So if you have a question as we're going along, that is totally fine. So over this next bit of time, I will give you I just gave you a little bit of introduction. I'll let you know how we got where we are now, what we know, and where we're going. So this initiative for INCOSE started out in this past January, really kicked off. And we got approval from TechOps late in 2019 to make this initiative official. And since then, we have collectively brought our INCOSE group together. We have about 50 participants of the initiative right now, and have collaborated with several other organizations involved with Smart Cities, IEEE, and ISO to start forming our collaboration. But as we proceeded, we realized we needed to know where the industry was and what was happening within smart cities across the globe. So I'll tell you a little bit about what it is we know. So really this year, we're really embarking on how do we capture what existing knowledge is and figure out where INCOSE and us as systems engineers can fit in and provide the most value to these existing teams. And so that results then in where we're going. So let's get started. If you'll bear with me, I think the music should go with this, but I want to just take a minute to recognize that smart cities are something that is evolving. And as we all grow and learn, we may have a vision of what success looks like. And so there's a difference between what it looks like once you reach that success and what it looks like when you're learning. And so I have two examples here, and I just want to share with you these demonstrations. So first, we'll take a look at what success may look like.
Section, find it, goes to the air. Massive backside. Fully rotated, 540.
Okay, so I don't know if you could hear that extremely clearly, but the point was not necessarily what he was saying, but what we were watching was an extremely choreographed, well-programmed, defined set of activities that surfer was undertaking. The announcers knew the name of each particular move that he was doing. He executed them really well, and it was just ideal. So that is what success can look like. But just a reminder to all of us that along the way, we all have to start somewhere. So learning may look like this. And no matter how many times I open this, it doesn't go. But here's what learning looks like. So there's a big difference. There were no moves. There was nothing achieved. Just staying on the board and getting hit by the wave may look like learning sometimes. And what we want to do is help our municipalities move from a learning phase into a success phase with a clearly defined set of expectations, protocols, and a good handle on what success really means. So, okay, before we can move forward, though, we should probably define what we're talking about with a smart city. And this INCOSE definition of a smart city is the typical definition of a smart city. And so we're looking at the components associated with a municipality. So that includes the manufacturing and industrial aspects of government, the internet and intranet connections and Wi-Fi, the citizens themselves having digital technology, open data and sharing portals, smart health. So in the health sector, farming and agriculture, and the buildings themselves being controlled and regulated in smart ways. And then, of course, energy and utilities, and our favorite, transportation. So I didn't get to tell everybody that I've been a member of the Transportation Working Group for quite some time. That's where my heart is, and so that's I forgot to tell that to everybody. So INCOSE has been tracking smart cities tangentially for quite some time, all the way back to the symposium in 2008, where I was able to find an archive hard copy of a plenary speaker that gave information about what was happening in Taiwan regarding technology and humanity. And so this has been acknowledged by INCOSE all the way in 2013. Professor Brian Collins talked about what was happening with the Catapult project in London. Many of us transportation working group people may remember that. That was a pretty exciting discussion by Professor Collins. And Catapult specifically relates to optimizing transportation systems within London. So that was a pretty neat program. And then in 2016, Julie Alexander came and talked to us about urban development from the perspective of Siemens being one of the IT providers. So we've been aware and tracking this for quite some time. But smart cities really are a moving target. And if you just do a quick search on the internet for smart city, there's a lot of information out there about what is a smart city. Everybody's got their own definition. And the only real consensus in this right now is that we're looking at a trajectory of technology growth and change that is far more exponential than any rate of change we've seen before. This is not news. A lot of us are living this day to day. So I'm not telling you something you don't know, but it is the state in which we have to be operating and aware of. And this presentation is from Deloitte. And actually, we'll be able to hear a little bit more about Deloitte later on in this presentation. I have some to share with you about this particular report. So in understanding the landscape, we can see this is just a snapshot of some of the organizations that are associated with smart cities. So starting at the top left, you see the Smart Cities Council, and there are smart cities councils for the North America and for Australia, New Zealand, India, and they share collaborative information about what those smart cities are doing. They have challenges amongst themselves. It's a great collaborative portal. IEEE, of course, has a Smart Cities Working Group as well, and they do webinars and discussions. They have several standards that are out regarding smart cities in terms of the technology and the IT connectivity. And then we see, of course, AWS, Amazon having their fingers into the data platform for these smart cities as well. Then I think we head over onto the right side of the slide, and I think it's really interesting that the Consumer Technology Association, the Consumer Electronics Show, was a key holder of a bunch of smart cities information that happened in early 2020, in January 2020. And this indicated to me that there's a strong connection between the consumer and the consumer desire and the smart cities technology as they are existing today. In that, as we may approach it as systems engineers, we're really thinking about stakeholder perspective, and the consumer aspect of this almost makes it like it's a solution looking for a need, which is what we almost start to see. We have IBM with their fingers into smart cities, of course, as the IT provider. Hitachi has a smart city platform. Cisco has a smart city platform. And we see one representation of a Department of Transportation talking about integrating technologies into smart cities. So the people talking about smart cities now, there's definitely a ratio that there are more on the provider side, on the IT side, and there's a lot more information happening out there as technology becomes available and these tools become good resources for cities. So what does this mean when we start to look at an application of smart cities, and what does this mean to us? Our root question for this year. So there's obviously the transportation aspect. There's a waste management aspect that could be improved through data and technology. Water systems, of course, can be managed and improved through technology. Utilities, healthcare, all of these systems are part of what we defined earlier as a smart city. And once we start to take a look at these, we can analyze which are ideal or good or model smart cities. And so we can see this list, which is created by the IMD Smart City Index, and this was created by university research, and they came up with their top 10 smartest cities, and we see Singapore at the top, and Zurich and Oslo, all great cities that are smart. We look at another source, and this source is Roland Berger from Germany, and we see none of the same names on their list, which is really pretty fun, except for Singapore. Singapore is the only consistent name between these two lists. So how can we have such different definitions of what makes a city smart when we're talking about the same aspects of these things? So this is one thing that we really are working to define for ourselves, understand what these definitions are and how they're different. So if we do look into what some of the governmental agencies are saying, I pulled this quote, and this is from, again, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, which I thought was interesting. And this is Jennifer Harder. She belongs to the Department of Homeland Security for the United States, and she's a director for product security. But I thought what was really interesting about her comment here is that the folks at the agency level should be working across top to bottom and be able to really catch that wave, right? So even she's on with our surfing analogy, to catch the wave as it's coming. And it's an identification that there's a lot of collaboration and coordination that is required for these smart cities to be effective. And perhaps that level of collaboration and baseline requirement setting, that we might call it as systems engineers, maybe hasn't happened in as detailed a way as would be beneficial. So for our initiative, we came up with a purpose and the goals. And the purpose for our Smart Cities initiative is to support the communities through concepts, applications, technology, and services for smart cities by leveraging our systems engineering tools and principles. So our focus is those communities. There are a lot of public entities who are interested in generating revenue from smart city opportunities, which is great. I'm not opposed to anybody generating revenue, but our focus here is supporting those municipalities, not helping people find new ways for opportunities to become wealthy. So So the goal of our group is ultimately we would like to create a model that illustrates the resources and interfaces that may become available and necessary when developing a smart city. The enabling part, we would like to enable interconnectivity, reuse, and consistency across a municipality. There are probably opportunities out there in many municipalities for expanding existing knowledge and expanding some of their existing tools that they haven't been able to realize yet because they don't necessarily know that there's an interface there that they can leverage. So this is what we're trying to achieve as part of our initiative. So now I will give you a little bit of update as to where we are in the initiative right now since January. So we're 5 months in. We've learned a whole bunch in the past few months, and I'll give you some insight into that and provide some resources. But as we got started, we knew we wanted to create a model. And so we started putting down a concept, a very, very high level concept of what might become a model. And we got here and we realized, we probably need to have some better definitions first. So we took a step back and said, okay, if we look at this holistically, who in INCOSE and what working groups in INCOSE may have roles in smart cities? And so we just outlined several of the working groups, and what you can see in the boxes are various working groups within INCOSE, and you can see right at the very top, Anti-Terrorism International, Bill Mackey. So he's leading that group. That's a group that we will need to collaborate with in order to achieve our goals as an initiative. System safety, architecture, of course, all the infrastructure and infrastructure-related systems, healthcare. But what we are also finding is that some of the INCOSE-centric working groups, like the knowledge management working group, has been able to provide a lot of insight for us in helping us understand what definitions, how we can define our ontologies and keep ourselves consistent. So it's really been a fun exercise in getting to work with and know a lot of these different players within INCOSE. We're only 5 months in, so a lot of fun coming up. So the products that we have identified to put on our map over the next year. So this year we are working diligently on our concept definition, which means defining what to us is a smart city, which sounds like it's pretty easy, but in fact, as we can see from the top 10 and top 15 definitions of what smart cities are, may be varied. We're also defining what those pillars of success would be for a smart city and key metrics that we may use to measure those things. All keeping in mind that every particular city will define itself what it wants to be as a smart city. So what we define almost needs to be a menu or a selection box that cities can choose from and say, okay, here's what we're going to focus on to define ourselves as our smart city. We also realized that we needed a summary of existing efforts, just to really figure out what was out there, get a handle on that, and again, know where we can fit in. Defining our initiative strategy and vision will be a big goal for this year, developing our stakeholder list and management plan, and then taking advantage of opportunities to provide input on behalf of INCOSE to other smart cities, publications, standards, and practices as they develop. In fact, we have our first opportunity that just came up this week. The IEC has put together a standard for an architecture model and has asked for INCOSE comments on that. So I have not even been able to send that out yet to my working group team, to the initiative team, but we're looking forward to getting some feedback and providing some feedback to that other standards body organization. So really excited. Additional products, just we have our eye, we're going to focus this year on producing successfully and keep our eye to the fact that next year or sometime in the near future, we really would like to develop an architecture template, maybe an MBSE model. We want to provide public communication tools perhaps sales kit package, architecture, context diagrams, so all sorts of different systems engineering deliverables that we would like to put together we have on our plate. So in order to start taking the next steps, our first project was really to develop the smart city definition. And we have a group within INCOSE that is the TUS organization, it's Tailored Unified System Solutions. This is a group out of Mongolia. You may have seen them if you've had the chance to go to a symposium or a workshop. They are active members of INCOSE and have been really doing a great job defining what smart city could be. And so these tasks here, just to give you an idea of what kind of steps that we've taken so far, these next steps are ingoing. So we're well along in the definition, and now in progress actually is converting the model into English because it's in Mongolian, which is pretty cool info. But I do want to share with you, we do have some initial feedback, and this has evolved a little bit, but I want to share with you kind of what's been happening. So an initial definition of a smart city we had was that the city is capable of evolving and solving challenges in a timely manner by continuously collecting and processing quality data. So that's what we had looked at as our definition of what makes a city smart. And we took a stab at defining some of our key terms so that when we say system, we know what we're talking about. When we talk about a social system, we're all speaking from the same language. When we talk about a city, we know what we mean. So these have been evolved and developed as well, which is great and has been helpful for us as we're moving forward. And here's a really cool part of our definition as it's been coming. And again, this is developed by the test group. And this is an attempt to define what is at the heart of the smart city. What are the needs of the citizens in the smart city? And the taxonomy of fundamental human needs, of course, comes to mind. And I think there are several models of that. But what we can see is, there's a need for subsistence, protection, affection, understanding, participation, and all of these fundamental human needs. If we take a look at that and put that into the context of a smart city with understanding of how the city is correlated with those humans at the center, we can start to really understand how it all fits together. So we're using this and we're making minor adjustments to it, and that's what's underway right now, to define more clearly. So I'll walk you through this. This looks a little complicated, and I've let you kind of look at it for a minute. But what you see at the heart is that fundamental human needs, and that is identified as the needs of the citizens, who you see directly adjacent on the right and the left, that fundamental human needs. So the citizens of the smart city have those needs, and they are fulfilled. And what happens is the citizens, so if you start on the left-hand side and go from the citizens, how you read this chart is the citizens have a need to solve challenges. So they go up, and you can see the red lines that connect the citizens to those next entities who are some of our stakeholders for the smart city. But the need to solve challenges leads us to a diagnosis. Once we get the diagnosis, then we plan, we check our planned results, and then those same people have to perform some duties, and hopefully that resolves the need for that fundamental human need. And it goes back to the process of monitoring. We analyze it, and then say if we achieve those, then our effect is positive. And so through this lens, it will help us analyze the different stakeholders that we've identified and roles and responsibilities of team members participating in the smart cities efforts. So if we take the same model and use this, it can also help us define some metrics for measurement of what that smart city may look like. So by putting, you can see the green boxes that kind of identify the particular efforts or initiatives for those organizations, we can see some potential metrics that may come out that help us to understand how well these needs are being met ultimately. And so this is this particular part we have not delved deep into to analyze the alignment of those metrics and make sure that we're satisfied as a group with the alignment. Again, like I said, the task group making some changes after we had some group discussions. And so this is going to be coming out in about 1 month, about June 20th. So we're really looking forward to how these metrics may look and how we can use this model. So I will stop there for a second and see if there are any questions.
Hello, Jen. This is Mike Murrah from the UK. I have a quick question. What I see there is essentially a decision loop, almost a OODA loop kind of process, and it follows basically a feedback. And it does it in a, I think it takes everything into account that you go through this planning process, and then you deliver the plan and you measure yourself against it and make corrections. Are there other alterations to that? Because I know in some decision loops, you may have things requiring in a much shorter time because of response that's needed, and some more long-term planning where you do need to be more considerate in that kind of decision making.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Mike. And this model as it is time independent. So I think we may be able to capture some of those differences in the metrics that we define of how well this process works. And that's a great identification and recommendation. I will take that back to the team. In fact, you can take it back to the team because you're part of our team.
Oh, yes. Yes, thank you. I will.
That's a great identification. Yes, absolutely. Because you're totally right. For a long range planning, the feedback loop is much different than for something where you have an immediate need and need to address a small issue. So, yeah, great. Thank you.
Hi, Jennifer. This is Marcel.
Hey, Marcel. I'm glad you made it.
I'm sorry for being late. My apologies. I made a terrible time miscalculation, daylight saving time. Sorry again. One thing that Jargel also said about this model is that this one is human-based. It's not based on systems. As you can see, it's organizations, people, and this whole loop is about people and not about systems like computers or cars or whatever. Please notice that also. That was my comment to this model.
Yeah, great identification. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. Okay. So we're really excited about that. Our next steps, in fact, in July, we're going to focus on refining that model, taking a look at it, refining the metrics, and hopefully getting a product that we can start to work through the INCOSE delivery process. With the International Symposium being all virtual, we won't have a time to meet together, which is unfortunate. So we will look for a time that is not at the same time in the symposium, but within the month of July so that we can get together on that. So if anybody's interested, please let us know. We'd love to have input as much as possible. So one other thing that I would love to share with you is of particular interest to the transportation group. And we invited the India MBSE working group to come and share with us what they had been doing. And so they have been working collaboratively as a group on MBSE. It's largely a group of DoD and aerospace members, and they wanted to do something that involved MBSE and not their daily work. And so they determined they should create for themselves a challenge to use MBSE to define a smart parking lot architecture. So I'm excited. I will not do this presentation justice. I will say Marcel has done a great job of logging our webinars. You can find them on our Connect site. I'll show you where that is here in a little bit. But you can go back and you can watch all the details and hear Joshi Nikhil explain the architecture in detail. But I will do my best to kind of walk you through what they did. So they wanted to create a smart parking lot. So they walked through their systems engineering process and identified the stakeholders and which phase of the life cycle those stakeholders would participate in, and further developed a mind map of how the smart parking was related together, where all of the pieces fit in, and then ultimately we're able to find a smart city. So Pune, P-U-N-E, is a smart city that is nearby for our colleagues in India, and they work together to create a system for this particular smart city. They were having a need to collaborate on parking spaces. Parking spaces are limited, and so they put out a system where you could reserve a space in a parking lot on your cell phone, and the city wanted to know how that would work and how they could collect the information on this, collect the revenue, and provide good service for the citizens of their city. And so they developed this model then for understanding of that particular scenario. And so we can see that they've even identified the city council on the top left side as a stakeholder. They've got the law enforcement and the need for the law enforcement potentially to track specific vehicles, parking status display on display board, and then processing payments as well. So all of these stakeholders are represented. And one thing that I find particularly interesting about this model is that they identified their parking app, the actual cell phone app, as a stakeholder, which I think was a really interesting way to treat that and gave it some benefit that I saw as they were developing this model. So for all of those of you who love MBSE, here's just a quick snapshot of some of the pieces of the model. So their high-level requirements were defined here. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail on this, but this is just an enticement to lead you to the actual presentation. But what I do want to share with you is after they had gone through all of this development, the MBSE team was able to develop a simulation model of their smart parking tool. So let me see if I can walk you through this here. And we're going to play. So this has an option. You can set the number of vehicles that will need to park, percentage of spaces that can be reserved, and then what happens to the frustrated cargo. You can see the cars just going about their daily business. And we go back to the models. You can see that the model is counting the number of spaces that are available and the number that are taken. And it's also tracking the number of spaces that are taken based on a reservation. So if you have a 50% reservation rate, then that allows 50% of open spaces, which means that sometimes when someone pulls up, space may look open, but it's reserved already. They had set benchmark for a 15-minute reservation time. And this is pretty interesting. You can see in the model now, all the spaces are taken who are still reserved, and what happens over time, how many people come and go that are frustrated, satisfied, unsatisfied, or highly unsatisfied. And they define that highly unsatisfied group as being ones who had a reservation that were not able to access their space. Unsatisfied were groups that showed up and were able to, didn't have a reservation and were not able to access the space. And then satisfied were people who could get a space. So it was really interesting how they were able to take that MBSE model and really turn it into a practical demonstration that they were able to share with their municipality. So that was pretty cool. There are tons of snapshots of that particular architecture and the way they describe that. So it's pretty interesting, and that's available on our Connect site within INCOSE. We also, so, you know, since this is the transportation group, I'll pause here and do my best. I think, Marcel, I'm so glad you're here. And perhaps if anybody has questions about this model or something that we may be able to answer now, I'll pause here for a second. Okay, hearing none, I shall continue. We were also able to hear from the city of Rennes, France, which is a city, it's a metropolis just to the west of Paris. It's got a substantial population of 450,000 people, and they had taken on an initiative to become a smart city. So they used the Dassault Systems model, and so this is a particular model related to a vendor that is associated with INCOSE, which is great, and we're really grateful that they were able to share with us their experience supporting the city of Rennes as they developed their smart city. So what I've done, as to not take away from Guillaume Lenoel's presentation, is I've taken some screenshots so you can see what he shared. And again, this is to entice you to watch if you would like this presentation. But that gives you an idea of the city of Rennes, where it is, the expected benefits from their smart city. And they really were, the city governance was excited to use this as a holistic approach tool. And they've really used this model in interesting ways. Specifically, one thing that jumped out to me is they had developed a 3D model of the city. And before they would approve a tall building, they would take a look at how the shadowing impact of that building would affect their city streetscape, which was a really neat approach to deciding on how they wanted their city to look, and a really interesting way to use technology to inform decision making. And it seems to be working very well for them. The citizen participation with the city of Rennes is very, very high. The citizens are quite satisfied with how their city is evolving, and they really feel engaged based on what the reports were. So it's interesting how these technologies can really help people engage in ways that we hadn't expected. And some of us may have even noticed that during this COVID period of time. I know for my organization, we have held town halls and public meetings that have had record numbers of attendance and participation because it can be done virtually. It doesn't have to be done in person. And so leveraging those technologies is really interesting. And I think we're at such a great time right now, after everyone's really much more comfortable with the virtual world and being able to engage in that virtual way. So it's just a cool time for us now. But the city of Rennes gives you a little bit more of a snapshot of some of the tools that they have and the platform that they actually developed, the Dassault System platform for decision making. It's got a ton of reporting and data analytics. Really gives us some insight into how these tools can be used early on in that planning cycle. which I think is really neat about the Rennes application, is that they're using the technology to inform their decisions. Oh, that's great. And if you get this presentation, the recording will be directly, that link right there in the bottom left-hand side will take you directly to the presentation. We also, so I'll pause there for a second. Any questions on the City of Rennes presentation? Marcel, did I miss anything?
Jennifer, just one remark. This presentation is only available for those people who are already members of the Smart Cities group, because it's a somewhat restricted area on the Connect site. So if anyone is interested in this presentation, I would suggest that I copy it into the Transportation Working Group Connect site.
We could do that, yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea. And we could also, if you would like to participate in our initiative, you can also gain access that way. Cool, thank you, Marcel. Okay, and then to bring us up to speed, we have a couple of members on our initiative team from Deloitte, the consulting firm, who has a Smart Cities specific consulting arm. And so they've put together a series of sort of status reports and overviews of what's happening across the globe in terms of smart cities. And so they're in this report, which again is available on our Connect site, and you can just get it online as well. It is freely available for download. They've created it in 2015, updated it in 2016, and updated it again in 2018. So those resources are available. What we can see is that the goals of smart cities are being achieved across multiple sectors. And in reality, not all sectors are receiving the benefit of the goals or seeking to achieve goals, specific smart city goals at any given time. So one city may have a very high level of what we might consider smart health that is impacting their economic growth, whereas another city may be really focused on smart tourism and leadership, that is leisure that's impacting their economic growth. So this just kind of gives us a way to step-by-step parse and look at the different sectors and how they can connect with the goals of smart cities and some of the challenges that smart cities are finding. In addition, this report documents some of the different components of success for a smart city that have their leading indicators, or based on Deloitte's analysis of existing smart cities, the heart of a smart city would be then the strategy and vision of that. And that would be supported by the public and private ecosystems, the data, technology, skills and competencies, innovation and culture, and attractiveness of the city. And that then informs the projects and solutions that are implemented related to the smart city, which are executed by the government, businesses, knowledge partners, citizens, and others users. So this one bullseye graphic really gives us a cool way to analyze and understand how smart cities are put together from the ground up. And while our Deloitte partners were talking, Rael Copes was the one who actually gave the presentation for us. He did a great job, but it became clear to me that the technology piece, while it is leading the public perception right now of what a smart city could be, and thinking the technology, thinking about IBM solutions or Hitachi solutions or whatever technology solutions there are, that's one piece of the puzzle. And there's lots of space for us as INCOSE, as systems engineers, to have influence and help our municipalities develop their strategy and vision and really gather around this holistic perspective of where we can go with this. The IT piece of it is definitely a critical piece of the puzzle. It is a foundation, and hopefully it is not a lock or a preventer of other decisions that a municipality may come upon later. But that, I think, is where we can affect things as systems engineers, is by helping to see where those potential trouble spots may be and helping to optimize what they have selected as their tools. So on that, Marcel, were there any pieces that I missed to the Deloitte presentation?
Not from the Deloitte presentation, but Joe Weiss gave us a fair warning on his presentation for the Critical Infrastructure Working Group, that IT is not exactly security-based. It can be hacked, it can be dangerous to provide the data to all the people, because it can be misused, misunderstood, misinterpreted. But that was not just the Deloitte presentation, that was the presentation from Joe Weiss. For the rest, it was all perfect.
Yeah, that was perfect identification, Marcel. And Joe Weiss is an internationally recognized systems security expert. And he had a pretty strong warning for us as systems engineers to just as Marcel said, pay attention to our technology and security. And as we embark in these smart cities efforts, to really help our municipalities understand that security piece and how risky it could be. Yeah, thanks, Marcel. So, in summary, in the past 5 months, the few lessons that I have taken from this is that IT is a basis; it's not the end. We still have a long way to go, and I think there's still a lot of space in the world for us as INCOSE, as systems engineers, to help define this smart cities space and to help continue forwarding our progress. And as Dale opened at the very beginning, that I just wanted to point out this notification from the Smart Cities Council, you can see down on the bottom right-hand side, identifies Philadelphia's smart city journey has helped COVID-19 responsiveness. And this entire article is really about how Philadelphia has been able to leverage their data, in fact, not only their data, but the trust that they have built with their citizens through having a collaborative development of their smart city. They really have had an open and transparent process, involved all the stakeholders along the way. And now, because they have done that, they have earned the trust of their citizens, and it's actually helping them manage their COVID-19 responsiveness. So that's a good news story. It's a good news for us. And like Dale said, maybe we can get them involved and hear directly from them pretty soon. So if you are interested in joining us to plug in, here is information. So we meet the first Thursdays of each month from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern U.S. time, which unfortunately is about 3 or 4 in the morning for our compatriots in Mongolia. They have been so obliging to let us do it during our daylight hours, and Marcel's up at wee hours of the night at 10 p.m. So we appreciate all of that time. But if you're interested in joining, please send an email to me or to Marcel, and we will get you on that list. You can choose to join us. We have a recurring meeting set up, so if you'd like to join, it's the same Global Meet site each time. And of course, you can visit our Connect site on INCOSE If you go, we're not listed as a working group. We are listed as a program and project. So as you go to the Connect site, you need to look for the programs and projects section. And then in there, you'll see the Smart Cities Initiative. As Marcel mentioned earlier, it is a secured site, so you will need to have permission to get on there, but we are looking to have as much INCOSE collaboration as possible. So I don't foresee an issue if someone's interested in having access to that site. There's a lot of good information there that we're gleaning and look to share with everyone. So here is us, our contact information, again, in case you are interested in any of these things. We are happy to chat with you, and if you get this presentation, you are welcome to click directly on this hyperlink, which is also at the bottom of the presentation all the way through. You can just click on the hyperlink and it will take you to our homepage on the Connect site for INCOSE. Are there any more questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments. I'm Tim Ferris in England. One was related to that loop diagram that you had at the end of the first section. It seemed to be not very friendly to people who are red and green colourblind. And that's really all I want to say on that.
Okay.
Think of it from the point of view of somebody who's red and green colourblind.
That is a fantastic, thank you. Great. Yes, thank you for that feedback.
Yeah. The other one was stimulated by your discussion of the car parking arrangement that the Indians were working on. But as a more general point, you've been working on models which relate to the idea of a smart city. And I just have a sense it would be possible to move from the abstraction of the model, which doesn't restrict how things are going to be done, to then think that we're trying to smarten up an existing structure, so that in the case of the car park, is there any reason why we would want the smart city car park to be like the traditional car park where I drive in and I drive round and round looking for a space? Because a car park that I saw quite some years ago in Taipei, which was one of the cities which was recognised as a smart city in one of those, the car park entrance looked just like an on the side of the street garage for the house. You drive in, leave your car there on the tray. It's a sort of lift structure, and it puts your car where it wants to. When you come back, you say, I want my car, and it will bring your car back to the garage door. The car park actually does the smartness of putting the car where it wants it, and that saves a lot of space. And so It could be that in the smart city, the hardware that gets built is actually significantly different than it is in a human intervention to do everything type city.
That is such a great identification of some of the challenges, and these are real world challenges that our municipalities are facing, right? So there's not always enough funding to create something from scratch or to insert a new technology. And so our ability to model and bridge that gap, you're exactly right, is really helpful. So how do we get from here to there to then, you know, if we do take our existing parking lot and make it smart, how do we eventually move to the smart car loading, perhaps a vertical, you know, I think of a vertical type parking scenario versus something that may be horizontal. So yeah, that's a great point. And in this model, they had actually identified the traditional parking arrangement as a part of the model itself and added on the smartness of it. And they identified it as such, which I think was really helpful to say, just as you had identified, this is not a new idea. This is taking an existing platform and making it smart. So yeah, that's great. That's definitely an important piece that we'll have to look at.
Thanks. And another thing I noticed was in the various groups in INCOSE, the resilience group hadn't apparently, if I interpret your linkage lines much, actually engaged. And then later on you mentioned resilience. I think one of the challenges is, what are you actually conceiving of as resilience in relation to the smart city? And I think part of that is the level of maturity of thinking around resilience at the moment, where there are several competing approaches, some of which I don't think would see how they engage with any particular technology or any particular objective, whereas others might particularly engage with this kind of an objective of a smart city.
So that's a great observation, and I will say that the identification of potential working group partners was not intended to be a holistic top-down, but basically an illustration to say, hey, we recognize that this does cross-cut all over INCOSE working groups. But thank you for that identification, because we really haven't reached out yet in that way. We have been collaborating with critical infrastructure, which has a perception of resiliency, but that is a great note as well, to be wary of that definition of resiliency and when we interact with that working group. Do you belong to that working group? Would you offer a collaboration portal?
Yeah, my name's been attached to them for quite some time. I haven't been able to attend their meetings for various reasons, but it is a central area of interest to me in my research. So, okay. Yeah.
Well, let's try to connect a little bit and see how we can.
It might be worthwhile, pursuing that a bit further.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Jen, I have a quick question on, this is Mike Moreau again, on the commercial aspects of when doing these kind of initiatives, and you're dealing with, again, you mentioned IBM and other suppliers that have products that are not necessarily interoperable or based on proprietary boundaries that don't necessarily work well together. It seems there need to be an activity or a standard or an architecture set up to define this kind of open, closed architecture where things can play in an open way where they need to be for the common benefit of all stakeholders, and where they could be closed to allow proprietary type innovations to make things better, yet not lock up the whole architecture based on those devices. And the reason for doing that is prevent vendor lock-in, to allow more players in the supply chain to operate together. Has there been something along those lines looked at with regard to the Smart Cities initiative, as well as what you've captured?
That's a really great question, and no, the short answer is no, we haven't looked at that yet. Obviously that will be very important, and I'm really glad that you are joined in with our group. So you can
I'll bring that to the table. That's the kind of thing I do over here, so it can be helpful. Yeah.
Oh.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, awesome.
Jennifer, if I may.
Please.
The people from the parking lot had in their model also modeled some API to have an interface with other devices or other software, and they really mentioned your point, Michael.
Oh, right, yeah. That's so having an API does help, but then it's a way to get through.
That was their solution on this smart parking lot.
Yeah.
I don't say it's the solution, but it's a solution.
I agree. It could be as many APIs that allow the thing to work. But yes, it is a solution I've seen in other architectures. And it's an evolving thing to try to make the performance better and to allow more interoperability. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's an important issue because over time, the city has to be able to evolve to deal with new issues which are being faced over extended periods, as in human generations. And therefore, you don't want to be locked into an architecture because of the vendor you went to today for something.
One of the questions also was, you see in the middle of this picture, Bune's smart city office, they're supposed to have the data server over there, but that also wasn't made quite clear in their model, because who owns the data and who stores the data? That's also a tricky question.
We definitely have more questions than answers at the moment, but okay. We've got the power of INCOSE working on it. We'll have some more answers pretty soon.
Well, where the data is also has a significant impact on the question of resilience, because if it's all located at certain locations or under certain owners, then you have a brittleness which is associated with that fact. Whereas if the data that's relevant for a particular activity can be located somewhere distributed associated with the doing of that activity, if all else fails, that activity can continue.
Right. So, well, it's 3:35 Eastern now, and if there are one last question, if anyone want to ask, if not, then this recording will be available on the YouTube INCOSE TWG channel. So, what? Any more questions? All right, sounds like a no, and we would like to thank Jen and Marcel to be able to present to us and talk about Smart City Initiative of INCOSE, and make sure you join their Smart City Initiatives group, and we'll see you next month in the TWG webinars. Thank you all.
Thanks, Oki.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.